Most people think they're mentally strong until life applies real pressure. You've been lied to about what mental strength actually looks like. Society sold you a fantasy. Grit your teeth, push through the pain, never let them see you sweat. But here's the brutal truth. That's not resilience. That's just emotional suppression with better marketing. Real mental invincibility isn't about how much you can endure in public. It's about how silently you hold yourself together in private. It's not about building walls around your emotions. It's about developing the internal architecture that doesn't crumble when the storm hits. Here's what neuroscience discovered that changes everything. Pressure doesn't create weakness. It reveals the cracks we never learned to see. Your mindset isn't failing you because you're not tough enough. It's failing you because you've been building it on the wrong foundation. Think about the last time you felt truly overwhelmed. Not just busy. Overwhelmed. That moment when your chest tightened, your thoughts scattered, and you felt like you were drowning in your own life. You probably blamed yourself, told yourself you needed to be stronger, more resilient, more disciplined. But what if the problem wasn't your strength? What if it was your strategy? The most mentally invincible people you know aren't the ones who never break. They're the ones who've learned to break intelligently. They understand that true resilience isn't about avoiding the fall. It's about controlling the landing. In a culture obsessed with hustle, toughness, and pushing through, we've confused emotional shutdown with strength. We mistake numbness for resilience. We think that if we can just endure enough pain, we'll somehow become invincible. But that's like trying to build muscle by starving yourself. The logic is backwards. Here's the uncomfortable reality. Most of what you call mental strength is actually mental rigidity, and rigidity breaks under pressure every single time. True mental invincibility is about regulated flexibility. It's about building a mindset that bends without breaking, adapts without losing its core, and responds instead of reacts. It's about understanding that your nervous system is either your greatest ally or your most dangerous enemy, and the choice is yours. This isn't another motivational speech about thinking positive thoughts. This is about the science of psychological resilience, the neurobiology of stress response, and the specific strategies that separate people who thrive under pressure from those who crumble. Over the next 27 minutes, I'm going to dismantle everything you think you know about mental strength and show you what it really means to build an unbreakable mindset from the inside out. You'll discover why your current approach to handling stress is actually making you weaker, how your brain sabotages your best intentions, and the counterintuitive strategies that actually work. Warning: once you understand these principles, you can't unknow them. You'll start seeing the invisible patterns that control most people's lives. You'll recognize the difference between genuine strength and performance anxiety, and you'll never again mistake endurance for resilience. Are you ready to discover what mental invincibility actually looks like? Mental invincibility isn't built by acting strong, it's destroyed by pretending to be. Walk into any gym, any boardroom, any high-pressure environment, and you'll see them everywhere. People performing strength instead of embodying it. They speak louder to mask their uncertainty. They work longer to prove their worth. They never admit weakness, never ask for help, never show vulnerability. And beneath that carefully constructed facade, they're falling apart. Here's what behavioral psychology discovered that changes everything. The people who appear strongest are often the most fragile, not because they lack capability, but because they've built their entire identity on a performance that's impossible to maintain. Think about it. When your sense of self depends on never showing weakness, what happens when weakness inevitably appears? When your worth is tied to being unshakable, what happens when life shakes you? You don't just experience the original stress, you experience the meta-stress of failing to be invincible. Neuroscience shows us exactly what happens in these moments. Under chronic stress, the prefrontal cortex, responsible for rational thought, emotional regulation, and decision-making, begins to shut down. Blood flow redirects to the amygdala, your brain's alarm system. You become reactive instead of responsive, impulsive instead of strategic, defensive instead of adaptive. But here's the cruel irony. The harder you try to appear strong, the more your nervous system interprets this as a threat. Your brain doesn't distinguish between performing strength and feeling threatened. The constant vigilance required to maintain the tough persona actually keeps your stress response chronically activated. This is why so many high achievers burn out spectacularly. They've confused emotional suppression with emotional regulation. They think strength means never feeling fear, never experiencing doubt, never acknowledging pain. But suppression isn't regulation. It's just delayed detonation. Real strength is measured by how well you respond, not how loudly you resist. It's about developing what psychologists call distress tolerance, the ability to experience difficult emotions without being overwhelmed by them. It's not about eliminating discomfort. It's about changing your relationship with it. The strongest people you know aren't the ones who never feel afraid. They're the ones who feel afraid and act anyway. They're not the ones who never doubt themselves. They're the ones who doubt themselves and trust their process anyway. They're not the ones who never experience pain. They're the ones who experience pain without letting it define their identity. What breaks most people isn't the intensity of the pressure. It's the silence around it. The isolation that comes from believing you have to handle everything alone. The exhaustion that comes from constantly performing invincibility. The shame that comes from thinking your struggles make you weak. But here's what changes everything. Vulnerability isn't the opposite of strength. It's the birthplace of it. When you stop pretending to be invincible, you can start becoming actually resilient. When you stop performing toughness, you can start building genuine mental fortitude. The hidden fragility behind toughness is this. It's built on the foundation of other people's approval. It requires an audience to validate it. It depends on external circumstances to maintain it. Real mental invincibility, on the other hand, is an inside job. It doesn't need witnesses. It doesn't require perfect conditions. It exists independent of other people's opinions. So ask yourself, are you building strength, or are you just performing it? Are you developing resilience, or are you just avoiding the appearance of weakness? Because the difference between the two will determine whether you thrive under pressure or shatter when it matters most. The most dangerous lie you can tell yourself is that you're fine when you're not. The most powerful truth you can embrace is that struggling doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. You don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your neurochemistry. Here's the uncomfortable truth nobody talks about. Your mindset isn't just mental, it's biochemical. Every thought you think, every emotion you feel, every decision you make is the result of complex chemical reactions happening in your brain and body. And if your chemistry is off, your mindset doesn't stand a chance. Think about the last time you tried to stay calm under pressure. Maybe it was a job interview, a difficult conversation, or a high-stakes presentation. You told yourself to relax, to think clearly, to stay confident. But your heart was racing, your palms were sweating, and your mind went blank. What happened? Your chemistry overrode your intentions. When cortisol, your primary stress hormone, spikes, your brain goes into survival mode. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for rational thinking and emotional regulation, gets hijacked by the limbic system. Your amygdala starts calling the shots, and suddenly you're not the calm, collected person you intended to be. You're a reactive, defensive version of yourself that you barely recognize. This isn't a character flaw. It's biology. Your nervous system evolved to keep you alive in physical danger, not to help you navigate modern psychological stress. It can't tell the difference between a saber-toothed tiger and a passive-aggressive email from your boss. Both trigger the same chemical cascade that floods your system with stress hormones. But here's what changes everything. Mental power requires biochemical awareness. The most resilient people aren't just mentally tough, they're neurochemically intelligent. They understand that managing their internal chemistry is just as important as managing their external circumstances. Research from Harvard Medical School shows that chronic stress literally shrinks the prefrontal cortex while enlarging the amygdala. This means that the more stressed you are, the less capable you become of making good decisions, regulating emotions, and thinking clearly. It's a vicious cycle. Stress makes you less equipped to handle stress. But the opposite is also true. When you optimize your neurochemistry, everything else becomes easier. Your judgment stays clear under pressure. Your confidence remains stable. During challenges, your emotional regulation improves automatically. You're not fighting against your biology, you're working with it. Practical tools like deep breathing aren't just relaxation techniques, they're neurochemical interventions. When you breathe deeply and slowly, you activate the parasympathetic nervous system, which counteracts the stress response. You literally change your brain chemistry in real time. Cold exposure works the same way. When you deliberately expose yourself to controlled stress like cold showers or ice baths, You train your nervous system to stay calm under pressure. You're not just building mental toughness, you're building biochemical resilience. Sleep optimization might be the most powerful tool of all. During deep sleep, your brain clears out metabolic waste, consolidates memories, and resets your stress response system. When you're sleep deprived, your cortisol levels stay elevated, your decision-making deteriorates, and your emotional regulation collapses. No amount of willpower can compensate for poor sleep chemistry. Exercise is another neurochemical game changer. Physical activity increases BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which literally grows new brain cells and strengthens neural connections. It also releases endorphins, dopamine, and serotonin, your brain's natural antidepressants and confidence boosters. The foundation of mental strength isn't mindset alone. It's your body's ability to stay online under fire. When your chemistry is optimized, resilience becomes natural. When it's not, even simple challenges feel overwhelming. This is why some people seem naturally calm under pressure, while others fall apart at the first sign of stress. It's not about character or willpower, it's about neurochemical fitness. The good news? Unlike your genetics, your chemistry is largely under your control. Start treating your nervous system like the high-performance machine it is. Feed it the right inputs, give it the right recovery, challenge it in the right ways. Your mindset will follow your chemistry, not the other way around. Growth mindset is powerful until it becomes a trap. You've heard it 1,000 times. Embrace the grind, fail fast, keep pushing. Growth happens outside your comfort zone. It sounds inspiring, it feels empowering. And for millions of people, it's become a sophisticated form of self-abuse disguised as personal development. Here's the dirty secret about growth mindset culture. It's created a generation of people who are addicted to struggle, allergic to rest, and terrified of admitting they might already be enough. They wear their exhaustion like a badge of honor and mistake burnout for dedication. They've turned growth from a natural process into a performance metric. Carol Dweck's original research was revolutionary. She discovered that people who believe abilities can be developed through effort and learning, growth mindset, outperform those who believe abilities are fixed traits, fixed mindset. But somewhere between the research and the Instagram quotes, the message got corrupted. The real growth mindset isn't about doing more, it's about learning better. It's not about pushing through every obstacle, it's about choosing which obstacles are worth your energy. It's not about never being satisfied, it's about being strategic about your dissatisfaction. Many people wear growth mindset like a badge while hiding their inability to stop, rest, or reflect. They've confused motion with progress, activity with achievement, suffering with significance. They're growing, yes, but they're growing in circles, not forward. Constant motion isn't growth. Sometimes slowing down is the real transformation. Sometimes, the most courageous thing you can do is admit that you're pushing yourself for the wrong reasons. Sometimes, the biggest breakthrough comes from finally giving yourself permission to be where you are instead of constantly reaching for where you think you should be. True growth mindset embraces limitation, not just possibility. It recognizes that sustainable development requires cycles of expansion and contraction, effort and recovery, challenge and consolidation. It understands that resilience isn't built by never breaking. It's built by learning how to break intelligently and recover completely. The misused growth mindset creates what psychologists call toxic productivity, the compulsive need to optimize every moment, extract value from every experience, and turn every setback into a lesson. But not everything needs to be a learning opportunity. Sometimes things just suck, and that's okay. Sometimes you need to rest without calling it recovery optimization. Sometimes you need to be human without turning it into a growth hack. Research from Stanford shows that people who adopt a learning orientation, focused on understanding and mastery, consistently outperform those with a performance orientation, focused on looking good and avoiding failure. But here's the twist. Many people who think they have a growth mindset are actually trapped in performance orientation. They're not learning, they're performing learning. Real growth mindset includes the wisdom to recognize when you're growing in the wrong direction. It includes the courage to pivot, the humility to admit mistakes, and the self-compassion to forgive yourself for being imperfect. It's not about being relentlessly positive, it's about being relentlessly honest. The most resilient people understand that growth isn't linear, it's cyclical. There are seasons for pushing and seasons for resting, seasons for expanding and seasons for consolidating, seasons for taking risks and seasons for playing it safe. Trying to be in growth mode all the time is like trying to inhale without ever exhaling. Eventually, you suffocate. Invincibility isn't about doing more, it's about choosing better. It's about having the wisdom to know when to push and when to pause, when to persist and when to pivot, when to grow and when to simply be. It's about understanding that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is absolutely nothing. The paradox of true growth mindset is this: the more comfortable you become with not growing, the more you actually grow. The more you accept where you are, the easier it becomes to move forward. The more you embrace your limitations, the more you transcend them. So ask yourself, are you growing or are you just staying busy? Are you learning or are you just accumulating experiences? Are you developing resilience or are you just developing tolerance for suffering? Because there's a difference between growth and grinding, and knowing that difference might be the most important thing you ever learn. Resilient people aren't born differently, they train differently. Here's the lie that keeps most people weak. Resilience is something you either have or you don't. It's a genetic lottery, a personality trait, a gift bestowed on the lucky few who can handle whatever life throws at them. This belief is not just wrong, it's dangerous. Because when you think resilience is fixed, you stop trying to develop it. The truth? Resilience is a learnable skill, just like playing piano or speaking a foreign language. It has specific components, measurable techniques, and predictable outcomes when practiced consistently. The people who seem naturally resilient have simply been training their nervous system longer and more effectively than everyone else. Neuroscience proves this beyond doubt. Through neuroplasticity, your brain's ability to reorganize and form new neural connections, you can literally rewire your stress response patterns. Every time you practice recovering from adversity, you strengthen the neural pathways that make future recovery easier and faster. Your brain learns how to process challenges with less emotional cost over time. Think about it like physical fitness. Some people seem naturally athletic, but even they had to train to become truly strong. The difference between someone who can run a marathon and someone who gets winded climbing stairs isn't genetics, it's training. The same principle applies to psychological resilience. The US Navy SEALs understand this better than anyone. They don't recruit people who are already mentally invincible. They take ordinary humans and put them through systematic training that builds extraordinary psychological stamina. Their techniques aren't military secrets, they're psychological principles that anyone can apply. One of their core strategies is called segmenting. Instead of looking at a challenge as one overwhelming obstacle, you break it down into smaller, manageable pieces. Your brain can handle "get through the next 5 minutes" much better than it can handle "survive this" entire ordeal. This isn't just positive thinking, it's cognitive load management. Another SEAL technique is rehearsing success. They don't just visualize positive outcomes. They mentally rehearse their response to specific challenges. They practice staying calm under pressure in their minds before they face pressure in reality. This pre-programming creates neural pathways that activate automatically when stress hits. But here's what most people miss. Resilience training isn't about becoming fearless. It's about developing a practiced response that makes fear less loud. The goal isn't to eliminate anxiety, it's to function effectively despite anxiety. You don't need to be unshakable. You need a system that works when you're shaking. Research from the University of Pennsylvania shows that resilient people share 3 specific cognitive patterns. They view setbacks as temporary rather than permanent, specific rather than pervasive, and external rather than personal. These aren't personality traits. They're thinking habits that can be developed through practice. The most powerful resilience tool might be the simplest: recovery protocols. Just like athletes need rest between workouts to build strength, your nervous system needs recovery between stressors to build resilience. This means deliberately creating space for your system to reset through sleep, meditation, nature exposure, or whatever helps you return to baseline. Most people try to build resilience by exposing themselves to more stress. But that's like trying to build muscle by lifting weights without ever resting. The growth happens during recovery, not during the challenge. Resilience is built in the space between stressors, not during them. The key is progressive overload. gradually increasing your capacity to handle stress by exposing yourself to manageable challenges and then fully recovering. Cold showers, public speaking, difficult conversations, physical challenges. These are all opportunities to practice staying calm under pressure and then returning to equilibrium. But here's the crucial part. Resilience training must be intentional. Random suffering doesn't build resilience. It builds trauma. Deliberate practice with proper recovery builds resilience. The difference is having a system, not just hoping you'll get stronger through experience. Your nervous system is incredibly adaptable. It will become whatever you train it to become. If you train it to panic under pressure, it will panic. If you train it to stay calm and respond strategically, it will do that instead. The choice is yours, but you have to make it consciously and consistently. Resilience isn't a gift, it's a skill. And like any skill, it gets stronger with the right kind of practice. Real invincibility isn't unshakable confidence, it's adaptable vulnerability. Everything you've been taught about mental strength is backwards. Society tells you that invincible people are like steel, hard, rigid, unchanging under pressure. But steel breaks. You know what doesn't break? Bamboo. And bamboo survives storms not because it's strong, but because it bends. This is the paradox. That changes everything. The most mentally invincible people aren't the ones who never bend. They're the ones who bend without breaking. They're not emotionally rigid. They're emotionally flexible. They don't resist change. They dance with it. Cognitive flexibility, your ability to pivot mentally, adapt your thinking, and shift perspectives, is more predictive of long-term well-being than grit, more powerful than persistence, more valuable than raw determination. Yet most people spend their entire lives trying to become more rigid, more consistent, more unshakable. Here's what Harvard researchers discovered that flips everything upside down. People with high cognitive flexibility recover from setbacks faster, adapt to change more easily, and experience less anxiety during uncertain times. They don't just survive disruption, they thrive in it. Not because they're tougher, but because they're more adaptable. Think about water. It's the most powerful force on Earth, yet it has no fixed shape. It adapts to whatever container it's in, flows around obstacles, and always finds a way through. When you try to grasp it, it slips through your fingers. When you try to stop it, it finds another path. This is emotional flexibility in action. Emotional rigidity, on the other hand, creates breakage under tension. When you have only one way of thinking, one way of feeling, one way of responding, you become brittle. Life will inevitably present you with situations that don't fit your rigid patterns. And when that happens, you don't just experience the challenge. You experience the meta-challenge of your entire system failing. The most resilient people have what psychologists call emotional granularity, the ability to distinguish between subtle differences in their emotional experiences. Instead of just feeling bad, they can identify whether they're frustrated, disappointed, anxious, or overwhelmed. This precision gives them more options for response. But here's the deeper truth. Emotional flexibility requires vulnerability. You can't adapt to what you won't acknowledge. You can't bend if you're afraid of appearing weak. You can't flow if you're committed to looking solid. The very thing that makes you invincible, your willingness to be flexible, requires you to give up the appearance of being invincible. This is why so many strong people break catastrophically. They've built their entire identity on being unshakable. So when life inevitably shakes them, they don't just experience the shake, they experience an identity crisis. Their strength becomes their weakness because it's too rigid to adapt. Strategic. Journaling is one of the most powerful tools for developing emotional flexibility. When you write about your experiences, you create distance between yourself and your emotions. You move from "I am angry" to "I am experiencing anger." This subtle shift creates space for choice, perspective, and adaptation. Mindfulness works the same way. It's not about becoming calm, it's about becoming aware. When you can observe your thoughts and emotions without being consumed by them, you create the space necessary for flexibility. You move from reactive to responsive, from rigid to adaptive. Emotional exposure training, deliberately putting yourself in situations that trigger different emotional responses, builds your flexibility muscle. Public speaking, cold exposure, difficult conversations, creative challenges. These experiences expand your emotional range and teach you that you can handle more variety than you thought. The goal isn't to become emotionally numb. It's to become emotionally agile, to develop what researchers call response flexibility, the ability to pause between stimulus and response and choose your reaction consciously rather than automatically. Here's the ultimate paradox. The more comfortable you become with being uncomfortable, the more invincible you become. The more willing you are to feel your feelings, the less those feelings control you. The more you embrace uncertainty, the more certain you become in your ability to handle whatever comes. True invincibility isn't about building walls around your emotions. It's about developing the flexibility to experience the full range of human emotion without being overwhelmed by any of it. It's not about being unbreakable. It's about being infinitely bendable. The bamboo doesn't fight the storm. It dances with it. And when the storm passes, it's still standing, not because it was stronger than the wind, but because it was wiser. Mindset is built in your habits, not your hopes. Here's the brutal truth about mental strength. It's not created in moments of crisis. It's forged in the quiet, unremarkable moments when no one is watching. The people with unbreakable mindsets don't wait for emergencies to prepare. They live in a state of constant, invisible training. Think about elite athletes. They don't just show up on game day and hope for the best. They have systems, daily routines that build strength, endurance, and skill incrementally over time. Mental invincibility works the same way. It's not about having one perfect day of resilience. It's about having 1,000 imperfect days of consistent practice. Your brain doesn't want motivation. Motivation is unreliable, emotional, and exhausting to maintain. Your brain wants rhythm. It wants predictable patterns that it can automate and optimize. When you build mental strength through systems rather than willpower, you're working with your neurology instead of against it. The most mentally resilient people follow what I call the 3 system. 3 rituals, 3 rules, and 3 resets. This framework keeps your psychological armor sharp without draining your willpower or overwhelming your schedule. 3 rituals are non-negotiable daily practices that regulate your nervous system and build baseline resilience. These aren't massive commitments. They're small, consistent actions that compound over time. Morning sunlight exposure to regulate circadian rhythms. 5 minutes of deep breathing to activate parasympathetic recovery. Evening reflection to process the day's experiences. Simple, sustainable, powerful. 3 rules are boundaries that protect your mental energy from being depleted by external chaos. No checking emails before breakfast. No saying yes to requests without a 24-hour consideration. Period. No engaging in arguments with people who aren't arguing in good faith. These rules aren't restrictions. They're guardrails that keep you on track when decision fatigue sets in. 3 resets are quick interventions you can use when stress starts to accumulate. A 2-minute breathing exercise when anxiety spikes. A brief walk when mental fog sets in. A cold shower when energy crashes. These aren't major lifestyle changes. They're circuit breakers that prevent small stresses from becoming major breakdowns. But here's what makes this system truly powerful. It's designed around dopamine balance, not dopamine depletion. Most people try to build mental strength through suffering. Cold showers, extreme workouts, deprivation protocols. But chronic stress depletes the very neurotransmitters you need for resilience. The 3x3 system creates what neuroscientists call eustress, positive stress, that builds capacity without depleting resources. Each ritual gives you a small win that releases dopamine. Each rule prevents a small loss that would drain dopamine. Each reset restores balance before depletion occurs. Consistent wins are crucial because they build what psychologists call self-efficacy, your belief in your ability to handle challenges. Every time you follow through on a small commitment to yourself, you strengthen the neural pathways associated with self-trust and personal power. Your brain learns that you're someone who does what they say they'll do. Structured friction is equally important. This means deliberately introducing manageable challenges that build your stress tolerance without overwhelming your system. Taking cold showers, having difficult conversations, doing things that scare you slightly, but in controlled, recoverable doses. The key is progressive overload. Just like physical training, you start with challenges that are uncomfortable, but manageable, then gradually increase the difficulty as your capacity grows. Your nervous system adapts to whatever you consistently expose it to, so you're literally training it to handle more stress with less reactivity. Most people fail at building mental strength because they try to change everything at once. They attempt massive transformations that require enormous willpower and inevitably lead to burnout and abandonment. The 3x3 system works because it's sustainable. It builds identity through action rather than trying to change action through identity. Your brain doesn't care about your goals. It cares about your patterns. When you consistently follow small, manageable systems, your brain starts to identify you as someone who has their life together. This identity shift happens automatically, below the level of conscious awareness, and it's far more powerful than any motivational speech or vision board. Power isn't in intensity, it's in consistency. Mental armor isn't built through heroic efforts, it's built through boring repetition. The most invincible people you know aren't doing anything extraordinary. They're doing ordinary things extraordinarily consistently. Your transformation doesn't need to be dramatic to be real. It just needs to be daily. Mental invincibility isn't about being untouchable. It's about being internally prepared. You came here thinking you needed to become harder, tougher, more resistant to life's pressures. But now you know the truth. Real strength isn't about building walls around your emotions. It's about developing the internal architecture that doesn't crumble when the storm hits. The transformation you're seeking isn't loud. It won't announce itself with fanfare or dramatic breakthroughs. It's built in silent choices, rewired reflexes, and practiced recovery. It's forged in the quiet moments when you choose your response instead of defaulting to your reaction. It's strengthened every time you honor your boundaries, regulate your chemistry, and trust your process over other people's opinions. You don't become unbreakable overnight, but you become unshakable through practice. Every time you implement the 3x3 system, you're building mental armor. Every time you choose flexibility over rigidity, you're developing true resilience. Every time you treat your nervous system like the high-performance machine it is, you're investing in your future invincibility. The 6 principles you've learned today aren't just concepts, they're tools. The hidden fragility behind toughness shows you why performing strength makes you weaker. Understanding your neurochemistry gives you the power to optimize your internal state. Recognizing the misused growth mindset prevents you from grinding yourself into exhaustion. Knowing that resilience is a skill means you can develop it systematically. Embracing emotional flexibility makes you truly unbreakable. And building daily systems ensures your transformation is sustainable. But here's what matters most. You already have everything you need. You don't need perfect conditions, unlimited time, or extraordinary circumstances. You need ordinary consistency, applied to the right principles. You need to stop waiting for motivation and start building systems. You need to stop performing strength and start developing it. The real transformation begins when you stop asking, "How can I avoid breaking?" and start asking, "How can I break intelligently and recover completely?" When you stop trying to eliminate stress and start learning to dance with it. When you stop building walls and start building flexibility. Your mental invincibility isn't about becoming someone else. It's about becoming more fully yourself. The version of you that doesn't need external validation to feel secure, doesn't need perfect conditions to perform well, and doesn't need other people's approval to make decisions that serve your highest good. The life you want is waiting on the other side of the boundaries you're afraid to set, the systems you're afraid to implement, and the person you're afraid to become. Not because that person is harder or tougher, but because they're more honest, more flexible, and more internally prepared for whatever comes. Now ask yourself, are you building your mind, or just hoping it won't collapse? Are you developing real resilience or just performing toughness? Are you creating sustainable strength or just enduring until you break? The choice is yours. The tools are in your hands. The transformation starts now. Leave a comment. What moment tested your resilience the most? And how did you transform because of it? Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear to start their own journey toward true mental invincibility. Remember, you don't have to be unbreakable to be unstoppable. You just have to be unshakable. And that's something you can build, one small choice at a time. The storm is coming, but now you know how to dance with it.